Good morning, everyone. While we get this organized, I appreciate you hanging on, and we expect this to take about 20 minutes to move through, but thanks for your time today. I know that everyone's busy and there's never enough time in the day to do everything. So we just wanted to share, kind of staying along that R to O theme. We get my screen shared here. We wanted to just kind of move through the process that we recently went through, both in our office internally and then reaching out and doing some collaboration with Kenzie and the social science side of this. But the background on this is in our office, our lead forecast team had wanted to, during the cold season, reinvent and improve on our risk messaging, our convective risk messaging for the warm season. And the bottom line is we were really struggling with it. We were struggling with consensus. We were struggling with a direction and with what we wanted, how we wanted to message. And then Kenzie's paper came out, and this came out in February, and it was immediate clarity for us, and it was research which basically took the subjectivity out of it, maybe, if you will. I think you've all gone through this in your office where there's people that have ideas on how certain messaging should go or graphics should go, and we kind of develop it in our little world, if you will, in-house, and we're not reaching out and taking more information in on the best way to necessarily always do that. And so Kenzie's paper came out, and she's going to go through some of that research today, and it gave us great clarity on the direction we wanted to move with our graphic reinvent, if you will, for the convective season. So I'm going to hand it over to Kenzie. She's going to go through her research, and then the second half, I'm just going to go through some of the templates that we use now and just illustrate some of the science that we built into those based on her work and some of the other social science work. But it's really a great example of R2O, and it happened really over a matter of like 2 weeks. It went really quick. So Kenzie, I will turn it over to you and let you go through the great research you did on SPC risk messaging.
Awesome, thanks, Dan. Yeah, and I think this has been a really fantastic experience for us at the Institute for Public Policy Research and Analysis, just to be able to see that the work we're doing is useful, because sometimes you sit in your research world and you wonder if we're actually hitting on some of the biggest challenges in operations, if the things we're doing that are useful to operations. So this has been a fantastic experience for us too. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about a project we did called Evaluating Public Interpretation of the SPC Convective Outlook, and this is done by many of us here at IPRA and CIRO and the Storm Protection Center. So just a quick history of the SPC categories. They've been regularly issued since 1973, and then we started with slight, moderate, and high starting in 1974. The underlying probabilities, the 2, the 5, the 10% tornado probabilities, for example, were added in 2003. And then the additional categories, marginal and enhanced, were added in 2014. And this was originally meant to provide more granularity at the lower end of the scale. SPC was getting feedback from partners, especially emergency managers, saying that slight really contained a wide variety of events. And so oftentimes partners wouldn't know, is this a not very bad slight or is this a really bad slight? Because there was quite a range there. So marginal was added at the lower end, and then enhanced was actually first called an enhanced slight, but for technological reasons and everything we know here, it was shortened to just enhanced. So we know that there are quite a few challenges with the convective outlook categorical labels. This has been documented in a number of different studies, from Sean Ernst's master's work, which is now a paper in weather and forecasting, as well as some senior capstone work that's been done at a couple different universities. Interestingly, the data collection methods are all really different, but they're finding similar results. So it's a pretty strong signal that people really want to switch the marginal and slight categories. And then they also often want to switch the enhanced and moderate categories when you give people those 5 names and ask them to order them. We also know that people do recognize inconsistencies in Outlook displays. This is from Castle-Williams, a recent study by them. And generally, people tend to trust and use whatever display has the highest risk category or gives them the highest risk perception. So we know that there are challenges, but we wanted to look at what are some possible solutions. What are some other options that maybe don't have a lot of cost to change? What are different options that SPC is already using that might improve this interpretation? And so the data for this study comes from the Severe Weather and Society Survey. It's an annual survey of the US public, and we systematically measure reception, understanding, and response to severe weather forecasts and warnings. There are generally 2 different types of questions. Because this is an annual survey, we do have repeat questions that measure this baseline of reception, understanding, and response. So as products and forecasts change, we can see whether or not those changes are improving reception, understanding, response, or not. We also include new questions, or sometimes we call them one-time questions, that measure emerging topics or interests of that year. Some of the examples of those are probability communication. We've also done some experiments on nocturnal tornado warnings. In 2020 and 2021, we included questions about COVID-19 and how the risk of COVID might influence people's sheltering behaviors. And the SPC experiment that I'll be talking about here is included in those one-time questions. So this experiment was included in the 2020 fielding, where we had 3,000 respondents in the US, and we started in 2017. So we've got about 5 years of data now, but the data for this experiment is from the 2020 iteration. The experiment design, it was a little bit complicated, not too bad though. We gave respondents a random assignment of a forecast phrase, and then we asked respondents to rate their concern about the forecast and their likelihood of responding after receiving it. So the randomized phrases come from information that the SPC is already providing. So you'll see we have 15 different options here, so 5 different groupings. You could have gotten just a category, or just a level, or just the percent, and then we had 2 combinations where we combined the category and the level, and the category with the percent. Now, you were only given one of these because we did not want the first time you answered the question to then influence how you answered the second question, for example. So you either got just a slight risk, or you got just a moderate risk with level 4 out of 5 in parentheses, for example. If you want to go to the next slide, we'll give a little bit more clarity there. So this is exactly what our respondents saw. We gave them directions. We first said, forecasters often use a combination of phrases, scales, and probabilities to describe the risk. We want to know how you interpret these forecasts. Then we said, imagine that it is Saturday morning at 8 a.m. and you get a tornado forecast indicating that there is a slight risk, or there is a level 2 of 5, or there is a 5% chance for tornadoes at your location that evening. And again, they were only given one of these. Then we asked them to rate from 0 to 100 how concerned they would be and how likely they would be to change their plans. Now, if you go to the next slide, we'll get into some of the results here. If we gave people just the category label, the slight, enhanced, or moderate risk, we have, what I'm showing here is the median concern rating with the dot, and then the interquartile range. So the 25th to 75th percentiles are the error bars. And what we see with the category ratings is that the enhanced risk has a higher median concern rating than slight or moderate, and actually slight and moderate have the same median rating of 50 out of 100. This is different when you go to the levels. We see an increase in the median concern rating from level 2, 3 to 4. And then similarly with the probabilities, we see an increase in median concern rating from 5 to 15 to 30% chance. However, it's important to note that the overall magnitude of the concern ratings for the probabilities is lower than for the level ratings. So, that's just a consideration. If depending on how concerned you want people to be when they interpret these forecasts, you might choose the probabilities or the levels. Now, this probably seems obvious, but I think it's important to document that, the ordering of the words is not what we would maybe want it to be, but that the ordering is consistent when we use that numeric information. Then if we go to the next slide and we look at the combination, this is something that maybe surprised us a little bit. We weren't quite expecting this, but when you combine the categorical labels, so the word, with the levels, you see that the ratings are almost identical to that of the categories. So in other words, adding the levels or that numeric information really doesn't improve interpretation much at all. A similar story when you combine the categorical labels with the probabilities. You see that the enhanced risk with the 15% is still has a higher median concern rating than the moderate risk. If we look at the likelihood of response ratings, I won't spend too much time on this because quite frankly, they are pretty much identical to the concern ratings. So again, with the categorical labels, we see that enhanced has the highest median rating. And then when you move to the levels and the probabilities, you see a consistent increase in the median response ratings, that is from 2 to 3 to 4 out of 5. And then with the probabilities, again, a consistent increase from 5 to 15 to 30%. But again, the overall magnitude of the likelihood of response is still lower for the probabilities than for the levels. Then when we combine, again, similar story, we really see that adding the numeric information to the categorical labels does not improve interpretation. It does not change that likelihood of response. We have a similar, the same median, actually, likelihood of response for the slight risk and the moderate risk. And obviously we know those risk levels physically, meteorologically, are very different. And then for the combination of categorical and probability, we see the same likelihood of response ratings for the enhanced 15 and the moderate 30% combination. So that's a look at the rating scales. We also wanted to look at whether or not including graphics helps orient people's risk perceptions. So we did another experiment where we said on a scale from 0 to 100, how much risk does this forecast suggest for people in the Southern Plains? And then you got one of 3 options. You either got just the text that resembles a tweet from the SPC, you could have had the text with the regular outlook, or you could have had text with the public outlook. And when we looked at results for this experiment, we did see not a lot of change with graphics, but we did see that those risk ratings increased a little bit when we included either one of the graphics. And it didn't really make a difference whether or not we had the public outlook or the regular outlook. So we were showing a moderate risk there, and it did seem like when we included a graphic where we showed, this bullseye effect with 4 different colors with red at the center, that did help orient risk perceptions at least a little bit because it increased that median risk perception rating. So wrapping it all together, what does this mean? The current categorical scale is often misunderstood by the general public. We know this. It's been seen in numerous studies. We saw that again in this experiment that we did, where the ordering or the median concern and likelihood of response ratings was higher for enhanced than with moderate. But we did find that the use of levels and underlying probabilities alone can lead to a more consistent ordering and a more consistent rating. We did also note that the levels had tended to have higher ratings than the probabilities overall. It was also interesting to find that people anchor to the categories. So even when we put that numeric information next to the categorical labels, it really didn't help interpretation. It did help when we displayed just the numeric information. And then in general, graphics do seem to help orient risk perceptions, although that change is relatively small. And with that, I will just say that's the link to the paper for what I just presented, and then some of the reference reports for our recent surveys if you wanted to see any of that data. And with that, I'll pass it over to Dan.
All right, thanks, Kenzie. I don't know about others, but that social science information on our services and our mission service that we're putting out there is, I could just listen to it all day and just see how it's being absorbed and how people are acting on it. It's just fascinating to me. And so we had Kenzie and Joe Rittberger come and talk to the Sioux Development course in March. I'm fortunate enough to be one of the facilitators for that. And so I saw a good amount of this information, and then Kenzie's paper came out, I believe, in February in weather and forecasting. And as I had mentioned, we were in this cold season rework of our convective season messaging templates, and it was really hard to reach consensus in our office on the direction to move forward, and we kept making iterations of graphics, and there were always pros and cons to them. And then one of our forecasters, Jeff Mikowski, said, "Hey, did you see the weather and forecasting paper on SPC risk?" And I had not. I was busy most of March doing the SDC course, and it gave us immediate clarity. So the information you just saw from Kenzie gave us a direction, and literally within a week, we had a graphic ready to go. And what was great is I had met Kenzie and in that course, and so I went back to her once we had completed the template. I went back and basically vetted it through her and said, "Hey, what do you think of these templates? We're using a lot of your research for the guidance. Can you give us any pointers?" And she was able to refine certain little things in it, and then we moved forward. So it was really a really rapid R to O, if you will. And so we started to use this convective season, and then we had some offices asking for our templates. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of get this research out there to you all, and also talk about and just show you the templates and show you where they are in case you're interested in kind of piggybacking off some of this that we're doing. So again, just very briefly, you kind of think about developing a graphic, and I guess the ideal situation would be that middle point where you're taking partner feedback, you're looking at social science and behavioral science as to how do people react the best to your message, and then also trying to fit it into our operations and what we know scientifically about weather, and kind of that middle point. And to be honest, sometimes the partners, like when we first went to them with this template, they were like, they didn't really care for it as much. And I think some of that is just familiarity and comfort with what they're looking at already and what they've been trained on by us for convective season. So they a lot of times pick the one that was the same as last year. So we had to kind of educate and move forward, but there wasn't a great deal of education. So this is just an example of the new template that we use. We have the auto ingest the SPC risk into the PowerPoint slide. And there's a few different things that you'll notice on this, but the most important is really the anchoring to remove the words and go to the numerical values and not have them show up at all, because you saw from Kenzie's work that the anchoring with the words and the values of the numerics still brings you into that mix-up category, into that mix-up results that people screw it up. And so what we really did was try to just make it an all numbers game here. So along the bottom, you see the risk here is very simple. High is pretty easy to figure out, and none is pretty easy to figure out, and then we just have the numbers on the bottom. But we don't have any influence of the names, even though some of the context is actually in the categories. We're just using the numbers. We involved a couple other little social science findings, which include the probability values in there, of the likelihood of different things to just further define the chance of things happening where we could, and then really pull out the action, because Kenzie is really strong on, hey, people, even though you think they may know this already, when it gets down to a bad situation, they really want to know what they should really do. And so we wanted to bring that in. We tried to do that in a simplistic manner. And sometimes, to me at least, I feel like, gosh, this is so redundant, but you never know. And the results show that they want to be instructed on what to do. how to take action. Simply timing is in there, pretty straightforward. You know, we tried to go with a clean, simple look. We went to this primary threats and secondary threats. This slide doesn't have the secondary threats. I'll show you that in a second, but simple icons with what they primarily had to be concerned with. And then, so one of the problems you have, at least one of the challenges I have as a SUE, is trying to make the forecast staff as consistent in its service as possible, right? With different forecasters, with different experiences and different strengths. And so trying to get a consistent message across the team is sometimes a challenge. And so what this does is really takes the subjectivity out of it. So we anchor on the category and we have the same words in the template. So we use, for this example, it was enhanced risk. And you notice we say highest local risk. So what we do is we take the highest number for our forecast area that people are looking at, and we take that value and then we key in on that. And so we use the words right out of here: numerous severe thunderstorms possible. And then possible is an allow, you know, we do allow some flexibility for forecasters there to change it to expected or keep possible in there, you know, depending on their forecast confidence. But really the title takes the exact wording and then we put it over here on the left-hand side as well. So it's really not subjective. It's really a template that comes in and we just, you know, use it that way. And same thing here, this would maybe be for Grand Forks. If you had a level 2 for the risk, for local risk, you'd have scattered in the slight risks category 2, and then scattered severe storms Friday. And then here's just an example of the primary and secondary threats. Again, easy for people to figure out what the big ones are, and just another form of our template. So we just have that in the PowerPoint. So people come in, they see, okay, I can grab this verbiage. If they don't have it, it's really quick. They have the icons there. It's pretty straightforward. And then here's our second template. And so this is when we want to drill down a little bit more into specific risks. So usually what we're doing is we're using this on day 1, and maybe late in the day on day 2, we convert to this depending on our confidence level. But we kind of went with a chiclet idea here where we're giving different levels of risk. And these chiclet levels with the arrow are all defined by the probabilities. So again, we've taken the subjectivity out of them. So each of these is the probability of hail, wind, and tornadoes. And then we also use WPC's excessive rainfall outlook to give a level on flooding. So we drill down here. The words above it, we allow some forecaster discretion there where they can put in what they feel is the right wording for the event. So again, a little bit of refining there is allowed to message what you really think is important. On this day, this was a moderate risk. We had a few tornadoes on this day. One was a EF2. And so this was the message, the graphic leading into that day. You can see our local risk is a 4, widespread severe storms are likely. In this case, we have pretty high confidence. And so when we develop those, the level for the chiclets, they basically are level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that match the SPC risk. And then we just have this little helper that says, okay, find your, you know, if your wind is 30%, you just go to the 30% wind that would match an enhanced risk or a level 3. So your little guy goes on the, little marker here goes on the level 3 chiclet. So again, no subjectivity, just really using the SPC expert probabilities to guide your template and product there. And then we also have some verbiage for the words above the chiclets for those that might, you know, be a little, you know, newer to the game, a little bit, you know, just trying to build more experience or at bats with doing this. And especially in the northern, you know, some of the northern climates, you know, where we're not super heavy in our convective season. And then just an example of the WPC excessive rainfall outlooks, how we pull those in and give levels. Again, it's like, you know, it's all pretty straightforward. A marginal risk, a slight excessive rain would be a little bit higher on the chiclets, and We try to, you can do what you want then with the wording here, localized flooding likely, 40 to 70%, that matches the moderate excessive rain category. So it's really kind of laid out for the forecasters. And then there's a little bit of subjectivity, or a little bit of confidence that they can put into it too. What about those days when you have 2 threats? This is in the template for a tonight threat and then a tomorrow threat, or a day downstream that you might have, where we kind of simplify everything, and it's very little text and just a lot of icons and easy to consume. So that kind of runs through the templates. I uploaded this to our the local support team sharing repository that's on our Google Sites for the region. If you go there and go into the severe convection subject area and go into the ARX social science vetted SPC messaging, you'll get the template file, and you can download that and make it local if you want to. We wanted to give this talk in July so that if you wanted to play around with it with the remaining part of convective season, you could do that. But yeah, I think overall, this was a great experience, and just shows how interacting with the research community really helped us get clarity on the direction to take. And I think Kenzie was excited too that that her work was getting some legs and really being put to action. So yeah, that's our talk, and we can entertain any questions that you might have.